The first light of dawn crept slowly over the hills surrounding Samuel Cortez's ranch, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and the sweet aroma of wildflowers that grew along the creek that ran behind his home. Samuel, a man in his early 40s, had lived alone on this remote land for many years. He was used to the quiet, the endless stretches of grass, and the occasional wildlife that wandered through his property. Life on the ranch was simple, predictable, and often lonely. That morning, like most mornings, Samuel rose before the sun fully touched the horizon. He dressed in his worn boots and a faded shirt, tied the laces of his leather gloves, and stepped outside. His daily routine called for inspecting the fences, feeding the horses, and checking the water supply in the creek, which was the lifeline of the ranch. He walked with the steady rhythm of someone who had grown accustomed to solitude, his eyes scanning the land for any signs of trouble. As he neared the creek, he noticed something unusual. A thin veil of mist hovered over the water, curling like smoke and hiding shapes in its gray-white folds. At first, he thought it was just the morning fog, but then he saw movement, a flicker among the reeds. His heart skipped a beat, not because he felt fear, but because he sensed something extraordinary. There, partially hidden by the tall grasses, was a young woman. She was bathing in the cool water of the creek, unaware that anyone could see her. Her hair, dark and shiny, clung to her shoulders, catching the soft light of the rising sun. Her skin glowed in the early light, smooth and untouched by the hardships of the world. Samuel froze, not wanting to startle her. There was something about her presence, something delicate, yet strong, that made him pause in awe. She moved with a grace he had never seen before, dipping her hands into the water and letting it cascade down her arms. The simplicity of the moment, combined with her quiet beauty, felt almost like magic. Samuel quickly realized that this was no ordinary visitor. He had lived in the region long enough to know the signs of someone in hiding. The woman's eyes, when they lifted to scan the forested edges of the creek, were alert and wary. Every so often, she paused as if listening for danger, as if the world itself could betray her presence. Samuel understood without knowing her story that she had reasons to be cautious. Perhaps she had fled from something, an enemy, a threat, or a dangerous situation he could not yet imagine. Despite the intrigue, Samuel knew he had to respect her privacy. He stepped back into the shadows of the trees, allowing her the dignity of solitude. Yet even as he tried to withdraw, his curiosity grew. Who was she? Where had she come from? And why had fate led her to this quiet, hidden creek behind his home? Questions spun in his mind as he watched her move, delicate yet strong, like the wind shaping the hills over many years. He noticed small details that made her stand out. Her movements were confident, careful, and deliberate, suggesting someone accustomed to living close to nature. Her eyes, dark and bright, held intelligence and caution. There was a quiet dignity in the way she carried herself, a sense of pride that seemed unbroken by fear or hardship. Samuel felt an unfamiliar stirring inside him, a mixture of wonder, respect, and a desire to protect. As he watched, he remembered stories his father had told him about the people of the Apache tribe. They were known for their courage, resilience, and deep connection to the land. Samuel had always admired these qualities from a distance, but seeing this young woman made those stories feel real. He felt a strange sense of admiration, not just for her beauty, which was undeniable, but for the strength and independence she seemed to radiate. The woman finished washing and stood in the water, her silhouette outlined by the gentle morning sun. She paused for a moment, looking toward the opposite bank as if making sure the path behind her was safe. Samuel noticed her lips part slightly in a thoughtful expression, and for a brief instant their eyes met. There was a spark of recognition, not of familiarity, but of understanding. In that single glance, Samuel sensed the unspoken truth. She was running from something, and she was alone. Feeling both a sense of awe and responsibility, Samuel quietly turned away, knowing he could not interrupt her private moment. Yet he found himself lingering, listening to the soft ripple of the creek and the gentle rustle of leaves stirred by the morning breeze. The memory of her presence lingered in his mind, refusing to be ignored. As the sun climbed higher, the mist over the creek began to lift, revealing the sparkling water and the smooth stones beneath. Samuel returned to his chores, though he moved with a distracted mind. Every glance toward the creek made him wonder if she might reappear. There was something about her that had left an indelible mark, something beyond mere beauty, a sense of mystery, courage, and quiet power that intrigued him deeply. By the time Samuel finished feeding the horses and checking the fences, the creek seemed almost ordinary again. Yet he knew it had changed for him. That small stretch of water, hidden and private, had revealed something extraordinary, a fleeting glimpse into a life touched by struggle, courage, and grace. He could not stop thinking about the young woman, wondering who she was and what had brought her to this secluded corner of the world. As he prepared to return to his cabin, he made a silent vow to himself. He would keep watch over the creek, not to intrude, but to be ready should she need help. He did not yet know what form that help might take, or if the opportunity would ever come. All he knew was that the memory of her, her presence, her grace, and the quiet strength that seemed to radiate from her, would stay with him for a long time. And so, the day began with the same routines, yet Samuel felt a subtle shift within himself. He had glimpsed something extraordinary in the solitude of the morning, a reminder that even in a life shaped by quiet labor and loneliness, moments of wonder could appear without warning. The creek, the mist, and the young woman bathing in its cool water had created a memory that would haunt him, inspire him, and perhaps, one day, guide the actions he might take in the days to come. The days after that morning at the creek passed quietly on Samuel Cortez's ranch. But the image of the young Apache woman remained vivid in his mind. Each time he went about his daily chores, he found himself glancing toward the trees and the creek, wondering if she might return. The memory of her presence was like a whisper that lingered in the air, gentle yet persistent, reminding him that the world held unexpected surprises, even in the most ordinary routines. Samuel tried to push his thoughts aside as he tended to his animals. The horses needed feeding, the cattle had to be checked, and the fences required maintenance after the recent rains. Yet, even while he worked, he felt an unusual tension in the air, as though something significant was about to happen. Every rustle of the leaves or movement in the grass made him pause and listen. Sometimes he caught a glimpse of a shadow, a fleeting movement, but when he looked closer, there was nothing there. It was late one afternoon, just as the sun began its slow descent behind the distant hills, that he saw her again. She was farther down the creek this time, crouched by the water's edge, gathering what appeared to be herbs or wild plants. Samuel stayed hidden behind a cluster of trees, careful not to make a sound. Her attention was fully on the task at hand, and she seemed unaware of his presence. What struck him most was how different she looked in the full light of day compared to that misty morning. Her dark hair shone like polished wood, and her skin glimmered with the warmth of the afternoon sun. Even in the act of gathering plants, her movements were precise and graceful, as if she were part of the creek itself. Samuel could not help but admire her, not just for her beauty, which was undeniable, but for her self-sufficiency and the quiet confidence in the way she carried herself. Samuel began to understand that she was not merely passing through. She had chosen this hidden corner of the creek for a reason. Perhaps she had discovered it as a place of safety, a temporary refuge from the dangers of the outside world. He realized she must have been living in hiding for some time. Her awareness of her surroundings, her careful movements, and the way she seemed to listen to every sound suggested someone who had learned to survive on her own. That night, Samuel could hardly sleep. The image of her crouched by the creek, the sunlight glinting off the water, was burned into his mind. He thought of the stories he had heard from travelers and old neighbors about Apache women, brave, resourceful, and deeply connected to the land. He began to imagine what it must have been like for her, fleeing through forests and rivers, always alert, always careful, and yet still managing to find moments of calm in the natural world. The following morning, Samuel returned to the creek with a quiet determination. He brought with him a small basket of food, dried meat, fresh bread, and some fruit from his orchard. He left it in a discreet spot near the water, hoping she might find it. He did not approach her directly. He understood that trust could not be rushed, and that any sudden movement could frighten her. This small gesture, he hoped, would show her that he meant no harm and that, if she needed it, help could be found here. Days turned into a week, and Samuel continued his quiet routine of leaving food near the creek. Occasionally, he thought he saw her watching him from the tree line, but whenever he tried to approach, she vanished like a shadow. Each encounter or near encounter left Samuel with a mix of excitement and concern. He felt drawn to her, yet he respected the boundaries her fear demanded. He began to see her not only as a person in need, but as someone remarkable, a living symbol of courage and endurance in a harsh world. One morning, after a night of heavy rain, Samuel arrived at the creek to find evidence that someone had passed through. Footprints in the soft mud led toward the water, and small branches and leaves had been moved as if by careful hands. His heart quickened. She had been here, perhaps even in the night, taking what she needed and leaving no trace. Samuel marveled at her skill and caution, realizing that survival required not only strength but wisdom and patience. Finally, on a calm, warm morning, she appeared again. This time, she did not immediately flee. Samuel noticed her eyes, alert yet curious, studying him from a distance. She had dressed modestly in a simple, handmade garment, and she carried herself with the same grace that had first captured his attention. Slowly, carefully, she approached the spot where he had left the basket. Her movements were cautious, but there was no fear in her eyes as she looked at him. Samuel stepped forward slightly, keeping his voice low and steady. "I mean no harm," he said. "I only wish to help." The woman paused, measuring his words and his intentions. She had clearly learned to trust few people, and perhaps never someone she had just seen once or twice. Yet there was something in Samuel's tone, in his calm, respectful manner, that made her consider the possibility. Slowly, she reached for the basket, her fingers brushing over its contents. She examined the food carefully, her dark eyes meeting his briefly before she stepped back into the shadows of the trees. Over the next days, their interaction became a silent ritual. Samuel would leave food or water, and she would take it when she was sure no one else was watching. Each time she appeared, he learned more about her intelligence, resourcefulness, and quiet courage. He realized she was not just a young woman in hiding. She was someone who had survived through sheer will and determination, someone who understood the rhythms of nature and the dangers of the world around her. Samuel began to feel a deep respect and admiration for her. He also felt a growing sense of responsibility. He knew that she could not remain at the creek forever. Someone might discover her, or the harshness of life could catch up with her. And yet, he also knew that he could not force her to trust him or intervene prematurely. He could only wait, observe, and offer what assistance he could without violating her freedom or sense of independence. One afternoon, while Samuel worked near the barn, he noticed smoke rising in the distance. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but enough to make him pause. He wondered if someone was searching for her, or if it was just a distant campfire. His mind raced with possibilities. He knew that, should danger approach, the young woman would need every advantage to stay safe. Samuel felt the weight of his responsibility pressing on him, yet he also understood that his respect for her freedom was as important as any action he might take. As evening fell, he made his way back to the creek, careful to stay hidden. He found her there, crouched by the water, her eyes alert and scanning the horizon. This time, when she noticed him, she did not retreat immediately. Instead, she held his gaze, as if silently acknowledging their growing understanding. Samuel realized that a fragile connection was forming, one built not on words, but on trust, respect, and shared awareness of the world around them. The sun dipped below the hills, casting long shadows over the creek, and the water shimmered with the final light of day. Samuel stood quietly watching her work, aware that this moment was a rare and precious one. He felt a profound sense of awe, not just at her physical beauty, but at the strength, intelligence, and resilience she carried with her. It was a beauty born not only of form, but of character, of courage, and of survival. As night fell and the first stars appeared in the sky, Samuel reluctantly began his walk back to the ranch. The young woman remained at the creek, a silent guardian of her own life. Yet Samuel knew that this was only the beginning of their story. The connection they had begun to form, quiet, careful, and respectful, was fragile but undeniable. It held the promise of understanding, trust, and perhaps, in time, a deeper bond. And so, the creek became a place of quiet mystery and tentative friendship. Samuel returned to his work, aware that each day might bring new challenges, new dangers, and new discoveries. He had glimpsed a life very different from his own, yet connected in ways he could not fully understand. And in that connection, he found not only curiosity and wonder, but also a sense of purpose, a reason to act with care, patience, and respect, as he navigated the unfolding story of the fugitive Apache woman whose beauty and courage had captured his heart and imagination. The days. That followed brought a quiet rhythm to Samuel Cortez's life. But the presence of the young Apache woman behind the creek had grown into something more than a fleeting curiosity. Samuel found himself thinking about her constantly, imagining the dangers she might face and the hardships she must have endured to survive on her own. Each time he went to the creek, he felt a mixture of hope and worry. The connection they had begun to form, delicate as it was, seemed to grow stronger with each careful encounter. One afternoon, after tending to the cattle, Samuel decided to try a small act of kindness beyond leaving food. He had found some fresh watermelons in his orchard, plump and sweet, and carefully carried one toward the creek. He left it on a flat rock near the water, hoping it would provide her with nourishment, comfort, and perhaps a small sign that she was not alone. Then he retreated to a nearby hill, hiding behind a cluster of bushes, and watched. He did not have to wait long. The young woman appeared, moving cautiously along the bank. She paused when she spotted the watermelon, her dark eyes widening slightly in surprise. Samuel noticed the brief hesitation in her posture, the way her hands hovered above the fruit before she finally picked it up. It was a simple gesture, but Samuel understood that trust was being built here, brick by brick, carefully and slowly. For several moments, she sat by the water's edge, eating the fruit and glancing in his direction. Samuel did not move or speak. He understood that any sudden action could undo the fragile connection they were forming. She seemed to sense that he meant no harm, that he was simply offering help without expectation. In that small, wordless moment, a bond began to form, a quiet understanding that they could depend on each other, even in the midst of uncertainty and danger. Over the next few days, Samuel continued his cautious routine. He would leave food, water, and occasionally blankets or simple tools near the creek. She accepted the gifts silently, never speaking, but her presence grew bolder. He sometimes caught glimpses of her watching him from a distance, and occasionally she lingered near the edge of the trees, as if testing whether it was safe to come closer. Samuel's heart would race at these moments, not from fear, but from the thrill of connection, the sense that he was part of a fragile story unfolding before him. One morning, Samuel decided it was time to try speaking to her directly. He approached the creek slowly, hands raised in a gesture of peace. "I only want to help," he said, his voice soft and steady. The young woman froze, her dark eyes locking onto his. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, with careful caution, she nodded slightly, as if granting permission for this brief exchange. "My name is Samuel," he said, keeping his tone calm. "I live just beyond the hills. I've been leaving food and water for you. You don't have to be afraid." The woman remained silent, but her eyes softened ever so slightly. Samuel could sense the trust growing, fragile yet real. Over the next several encounters, he learned that small gestures mattered more than words. A quiet presence, a careful act of kindness, and a consistent pattern of respect could slowly build trust even in someone who had learned to fear the world. One day, while he was working near the barn, Samuel noticed fresh footprints leading from the creek into the woods. They were small, careful, deliberate evidence of her movements, of someone living with constant vigilance. He realized that she had not been idle during the day. She had explored the area, perhaps searching for safe paths, gathering resources, or simply understanding the land around her. Each step she took was deliberate, a dance of survival and intelligence. As Samuel observed her from a distance, he felt a profound admiration. She was more than just beautiful. She was clever, resourceful, and courageous. Every action she took was calculated, showing a deep understanding of the world and the dangers it held. Samuel knew that he could learn from her just as much as she might learn from him. There was a quiet wisdom in her that could only come from experience, from facing challenges alone and surviving against the odds. But with admiration came concern. Samuel knew that her freedom was fragile. The region was not safe for someone in hiding, and the risk of discovery was ever present. He began to imagine scenarios in which soldiers, bounty hunters, or even strangers could stumble upon her. Each thought brought a tightening in his chest. He realized that helping her would require more than leaving food and water. It would demand courage, careful planning, and an unwavering commitment to respect her independence. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Samuel noticed her sitting by the creek, silhouetted against the golden light. She had gathered several bundles of herbs and plants, carefully arranging them beside her. The gentle rustle of leaves and the soft sound of the water created a peaceful scene. Samuel watched silently, aware that the simple act of observing her, without intrusion, was becoming part of their growing understanding. Slowly she began to speak, first in whispers, then in slightly louder tones. Samuel could not understand the language fully, but the words were soft, rhythmic, and carried a hint of curiosity. He realized that speaking, even in small ways, was part of her reclaiming a sense of control and safety. He responded gently, using simple words and gestures to show that he was listening, that he wanted to understand. This small exchange, though imperfect, strengthened the bond they shared. Over the next several days, Samuel noticed subtle changes in her behavior. She became more relaxed in his presence, occasionally glancing at him with something like recognition or even appreciation. Her movements, once always alert and careful, now carried moments of ease, small signs that she felt some measure of safety near him. Samuel felt a quiet pride and relief, knowing that his patience and respect were being rewarded in a way that words could not fully capture. Yet the danger never fully disappeared. Samuel understood that her life remained precarious. Every sound in the forest, every unexpected shadow, could signal a threat. And yet, in the midst of this tension, they found moments of shared understanding, moments of quiet companionship. Samuel began to see her not only as a person in need of help, but as a partner in observing and navigating the world, each learning from the other in ways both simple and profound. One afternoon, Samuel decided to try another small gesture. He built a simple wooden platform near the creek, a place where she could sit, rest, and prepare her food without being exposed to the sun or the elements. He left it with a basket of additional supplies, then hid nearby to observe. When she discovered it, her eyes widened in surprise. For a moment, she seemed unsure, then slowly approached, examining the structure and the provisions. She moved with careful curiosity, and Samuel could sense the quiet trust in her acceptance of his gesture. As days turned into weeks, a routine of mutual respect and understanding emerged. Samuel continued his work on the ranch, but his mind often lingered at the creek, wondering how she was faring, whether she was safe, and how much longer she could remain in hiding. He had come to care for her deeply, not only for her beauty or her bravery, but for the intelligence, wisdom, and strength that seemed to radiate from every action she took. In those quiet moments by the creek, Samuel learned more about patience, empathy, and the delicate art of trust than he had in all his years alone on the ranch. He realized that helping someone like her required humility and attentiveness, a willingness to act without expectation, and a deep respect for autonomy. And though the challenges were many, he knew that he would continue to be there, quietly, steadfastly, ready to offer aid when needed and to honor her independence at every turn. The creek, once a simple part of his routine, had become a place of connection, a space where two lives intersected in subtle but meaningful ways. The young Apache woman who had arrived as a mysterious presence in the mist was slowly becoming a companion of sorts, not in the conventional sense, but in the shared understanding of survival, respect, and cautious trust. And in that understanding, Samuel found a sense of fulfillment, a reminder that even in the solitude of the frontier, human connection could bloom quietly, delicately, and beautifully. The peace that Samuel Cortez had come to cherish was suddenly threatened. One morning, while checking the fences near the northern edge of his property, he noticed tracks in the soft mud leading from the direction of the creek. At first, he thought they might be from a wild animal, but a closer look told him otherwise. The prints were too deliberate, too human. Samuel's heart tightened. He realized that someone, or perhaps a group of people, might be searching for the young Apache woman. He quickly returned to his cabin, scanning the horizon as he walked. The wind carried a faint sound of horses in the distance, the rhythmic clatter of hooves against the dirt road. Samuel's mind raced. He understood immediately that this was no ordinary patrol. Soldiers or bounty hunters could be near, and if they discovered her, the consequences could be dire. He thought of the quiet mornings by the creek, the cautious glances, the moments of fragile trust. They were at risk of being destroyed in an instant. Samuel decided that he could not wait for danger to come closer. He needed to warn her, to prepare her, and to help her move to safety if necessary. He grabbed a small bag with food, blankets, and a few supplies he had saved for emergencies. Moving quietly through the trees, he approached the creek, trying not to make a sound. He could see her from a distance, crouched near the water, her dark hair glinting in the morning sun. "Stay calm," he whispered, keeping his voice low. "There may be danger nearby. You must move quickly but carefully." The woman's eyes widened as she turned toward him. She had sensed something was wrong but had not understood the urgency until she met his gaze. Without hesitation, she nodded, gathering her bundles of herbs and supplies with practiced efficiency. Samuel watched her closely, marveling at the speed and grace with which she packed her few belongings. Every movement was precise, honed by experience, a testament to her ability to survive under pressure. They moved together silently along the hidden paths Samuel had learned over years of walking the land. He led her to a dense grove of trees farther from the creek, a place he had scouted for emergencies. Here, they could remain hidden while assessing the situation. Samuel noticed that she seemed calm despite the urgency, her eyes sharp and alert. He realized that fear, while present, did not control her. She was a survivor, trained by life to respond to danger with intelligence and careful action. As they crouched among the trees, Samuel could see smoke rising in the distance, faint but unmistakable. Someone was approaching. The woman's gaze hardened slightly, and Samuel recognized a flash of determination in her eyes. He understood that she had faced threats before, that she knew how to protect herself, and that together they had a better chance of evading discovery. For the next few hours, they remained hidden, moving only when necessary and speaking in whispers. Samuel offered what guidance he could, suggesting routes that would avoid roads and open areas. She listened intently, nodding, sometimes pausing to make her own decisions. It was a delicate partnership, one built on trust, respect, and necessity. Samuel realized that their bond had deepened beyond simple kindness. It had become a shared struggle, a joint effort to survive against forces that neither of them fully controlled. As evening approached, the sounds of pursuit grew closer. Samuel could hear the faint calls of riders, the clatter of hooves over distant terrain. The woman remained calm, scanning the woods for escape routes and signs of danger. Samuel admired her composure. While he had spent years alone on the ranch, she had endured far greater hardships, surviving in a world where vigilance was not a choice but a requirement. They paused near a small ridge that overlooked a hidden valley, dense with trees and brush. It was a perfect spot to hide until nightfall, and Samuel hoped it would provide them a temporary advantage. He handed her a small water bottle, and she drank carefully, her dark eyes never leaving the forest below. Samuel felt a sense of awe at her resilience. Here was a young woman, alone in the world, capable of facing danger with courage and intelligence, and yet still maintaining the grace and dignity that had first captivated him. Night fell slowly, and with it, a temporary calm. The pursuing riders could no longer be seen or heard, though the possibility of discovery remained. Samuel and the young woman huddled near a tree, sharing what little warmth they could from the blankets. Words were few. Instead, there was an unspoken understanding, a quiet acknowledgement of the trust and dependence that had formed between them. Samuel realized that the situation demanded more than just hiding. They would need a longer-term plan to ensure her safety. He considered the options carefully, weighing the risks and possibilities. The nearest town was too dangerous, populated by people who might betray her for reward or recognition. The hills and forests offered cover but limited resources. Ultimately, he knew that helping her escape to a remote area, far from roads and settlements, would be their best chance. Over the next several days, Samuel and the young woman moved cautiously through the wilderness. They relied on hidden paths, thick underbrush, and natural cover to evade detection. Samuel found that he was learning from her as much as she was learning from him. She demonstrated ways to read the land, to understand the subtle signs of movement, and to anticipate danger before it arrived. Her knowledge of nature, survival, and self-protection was extraordinary, and Samuel felt both admiration and gratitude for her guidance. Despite the tension, there were moments of quiet humanity. They shared small meals under the shelter of trees, exchanged smiles and gestures of understanding, and occasionally paused to watch the sunset over the distant hills. These moments reminded Samuel that even in a world filled with danger, beauty and kindness could persist. The young woman who had arrived at his creek as a mysterious figure in the mist was slowly becoming a partner in both survival and life. a presence that inspired courage and hope. Yet, the danger was never far behind. One evening they heard the distant sound of voices, muffled but urgent, carrying through the trees. Samuel and the young woman froze, instinctively pressing against the ground, listening. The riders were still some distance away, but the proximity reminded them that time was limited. They could not remain in one place for long. Samuel felt a surge of determination. He knew that protecting her now required not only caution but action, bold, careful, and precise. The next morning, they continued their journey through the hills. Samuel guided her to a hidden valley, a place he had discovered years earlier while scouting the land. It was remote, difficult to reach, and surrounded by natural barriers that would provide protection. Here they could rest and plan their next steps. The young woman moved with a quiet confidence, setting up a small, concealed camp. Samuel watched her work, marveling at the skill and precision she brought to even the simplest tasks. As they settled for the night, Samuel reflected on the events of the past days. The young woman's courage, intelligence, and resilience had been tested repeatedly, yet she had faced each challenge with grace and determination. He felt a profound respect and admiration for her, deeper than anything he had known. He also recognized the bond that had formed between them, a bond forged in shared danger, mutual trust, and the quiet understanding that they were allies in a harsh, unpredictable world. Even in the darkness of the night, Samuel felt a sense of hope. They had survived the immediate threat, but the journey was far from over. The young woman's freedom, her life, and her safety depended on careful planning, vigilance, and the courage to act when the moment demanded it. And Samuel knew that he would be there by her side, ready to help, to guide, and to protect as best he could. In the quiet of the valley, surrounded by the sounds of the night and the distant rustle of leaves, Samuel understood something essential. True courage was not simply the absence of fear, but the ability to act with wisdom, care, and respect in the face of danger. And in the young Apache woman, he had found a living embodiment of that courage, a reminder that strength, beauty, and resilience could shine even in the darkest of circumstances. The days in the hidden valley passed slowly, yet each day carried a weight of urgency. Samuel Cortez and the young Apache woman had learned to move quietly, to anticipate danger, and to live lightly on the land around them. Though the valley was remote, Samuel knew it was only a temporary refuge. Their goal now was to find a place far from the main roads, a place where she could live freely without fear of pursuit. He had spent years exploring the surrounding hills and forests, and he knew of one such place, a narrow canyon far to the east, surrounded by dense trees with a small stream that ran year-round. It was isolated yet fertile, and he believed she could survive there safely. One early morning, Samuel packed their few belongings carefully. He kept the pace slow, knowing that any sudden movement might attract attention. The woman followed him, carrying her bundles with practiced ease. Despite the tension of travel, there was a quiet rhythm to their steps, a shared understanding that every moment mattered. Samuel marveled at her resilience. Even after weeks on the run, she moved with a grace that seemed effortless, her eyes sharp, scanning the landscape for danger, her mind always alert. As they made their way through the forest, Samuel could not help but reflect on the journey that had brought them here. He remembered the first morning he had seen her bathing in the creek, unaware of his presence. She had seemed so fragile then, yet even that first glimpse had revealed a strength he could hardly describe. Over time, he had come to see that her strength was not only physical but also mental and emotional. She had endured hardship, fear, and isolation, yet she had remained steadfast, resourceful, and dignified. The journey was not easy. They navigated rocky hills, dense underbrush, and narrow passes where a single misstep could lead to injury. At one point, a distant shout carried through the valley, and Samuel froze, signaling for the young woman to drop to the ground. They waited silently, hearts pounding, until the sound faded. Samuel realized that even now, after all the careful planning, the danger could appear at any moment. But the woman's calm composure reminded him that fear could be managed, that courage did not mean recklessness but careful, deliberate action. By mid-afternoon, they reached a small ridge that offered a view of the canyon Samuel had scouted. It was exactly as he remembered, hidden, protected, and rich with natural resources. The stream sparkled in the sunlight, and the trees offered both cover and the promise of sustenance. Samuel felt a surge of hope. This place could truly be a safe haven for her, a place where she could live without constant vigilance, without the weight of fear pressing down on her shoulders. The young woman paused at the edge of the ridge, looking down at the canyon below. Samuel watched her closely. For a moment she seemed hesitant, as if unsure whether to trust that this place could be safe. Then slowly, she stepped forward, her eyes scanning the terrain, taking in every detail. Samuel understood that this was a critical moment. She had survived by trusting her instincts, by relying on her knowledge and strength. If she accepted this place, it would mark the beginning of a new chapter in her life, a life free from pursuit and constant danger. Together, they descended into the canyon. Samuel showed her how to find edible plants, where the water was cleanest, and which areas offered the best natural shelter. She listened attentively, asking questions with quiet curiosity, and Samuel was amazed at how quickly she adapted to the environment. It was clear that she had survived in harsher conditions before, but now, with guidance and a safe location, she could begin to live rather than merely survive. As night fell, they made a small camp near the stream. The woman sat quietly, arranging her belongings, and Samuel could see a moment of relaxation in her posture, a rare expression of ease after weeks of constant vigilance. Samuel felt a profound sense of relief. They had faced dangers together, navigated uncertainty, and now at last she had a chance at a safe, independent life. Over the next several days, Samuel helped her settle into the canyon. He showed her where to set up a small garden, how to catch fish from the stream, and the safest routes for exploring the surrounding forest. The young woman proved to be an eager and capable student, her skills and instincts allowing her to thrive quickly in her new environment. Samuel felt a mixture of pride and admiration. She had not only survived the dangers of pursuit, but had embraced the opportunity to live freely, demonstrating courage, intelligence, and resilience in every action. One afternoon, as they rested by the stream, Samuel spoke gently. "This place will keep you safe. You can stay here as long as you need. No one will find you." The woman nodded, her dark eyes reflecting gratitude and something deeper, trust. She did not speak immediately, but her expression said everything he needed to know. Over the weeks, a quiet understanding had grown between them, built on mutual respect, shared experience, and the knowledge that each had been there for the other in moments of need. Samuel knew it was time to leave. He could not stay in the canyon permanently, and the woman would need to adapt fully to life on her own. The thought of leaving her was difficult. He had grown to care for her deeply, not just for her courage and beauty, but for the way she had changed his understanding of life, trust, and human connection. And yet he understood that the greatest gift he could give her was independence, a chance to live freely, on her own terms. Early one morning, Samuel packed his belongings and prepared to return to his ranch. The young woman walked with him to the edge of the canyon, her movements steady and confident. She carried a few supplies for the coming days, but otherwise relied on her knowledge of the land to guide her. Samuel felt a mixture of pride and sadness. He had witnessed her growth, her courage, and her strength, and he knew that she was ready to face the world on her own. Before leaving, he spoke softly. "You are strong, wise, and capable. Remember what you have learned and trust yourself. You will always be safe here, as long as you remain vigilant and careful." The woman nodded, her eyes meeting his. For the first time, Samuel noticed a small smile, quiet but genuine. It was a smile that conveyed gratitude, trust, and the recognition of the bond they had formed. Though words had been few throughout their journey, this smile spoke volumes. It was a silent promise, a farewell, and a shared acknowledgement of the extraordinary experiences they had endured together. As Samuel walked back through the forest toward his ranch, he felt a profound sense of peace. The young woman would thrive in her new home, safe from the dangers that had pursued her. And he had learned lessons that would stay with him forever: the importance of patience, the power of quiet kindness, and the courage that could be found in even the most unexpected places. For weeks afterward, Samuel thought often of the creek, the valley, and the canyon. He remembered the mornings when the mist hung low over the water, the quiet moments of trust and understanding, and the extraordinary bravery of a young woman who had faced the world alone and survived. He realized that true beauty was more than appearance. It was strength, resilience, and the ability to face fear with dignity. Though their paths had separated, the memory of her presence remained vivid in Samuel's mind. It was a memory of courage, trust, and the quiet, extraordinary moments that could change the course of a life. And in that memory, Samuel found inspiration, hope, and a deeper understanding of what it meant to care for another human being, not to control, but to support, protect, and respect their freedom. In the quiet of his ranch, Samuel continued his daily routines, but life felt richer, fuller, and more meaningful. The encounter with the young Apache woman had left a lasting mark, a reminder that even in a world filled with uncertainty, danger, and hardship, acts of kindness, patience, and courage could create bonds that changed lives forever. The young woman thrived in her hidden canyon, living freely, exploring the forest, and growing stronger with each passing day. She carried the lessons Samuel had shared and the skills she had learned from years of survival in every careful step she took. Though she lived apart from the world that had once threatened her, she remained connected to the land, to her instincts, and to the quiet, enduring sense of hope that Samuel had helped her reclaim. In the end, their story became one of resilience, courage, and human connection. A rancher had discovered a fugitive in the quiet of the morning mist, and through patience, respect, and careful guidance, he had helped her find a new life. They had faced danger together, built trust in silence, and emerged stronger for it. And though their paths had diverged, the memory of their journey, of shared struggle, courage, and understanding, would remain with them forever.